Hey, Algebra 1. So in yesterday's lesson, we learned how to find a greatest common factor, otherwise known as a GCF, and that was most likely a review lesson from pre-algebra for you. And the reason that we reviewed that is because we need that for today's lesson. So if you think back to chapter 6, where we were practicing using the distributive property, and we would take whatever monomial was on the outside of the parentheses and we would distribute it and multiply it times each term that was inside of the parentheses. In chapter 7, we are going to do the opposite. We are working backwards. So we're going to look for what terms have in common, and we're going to take it out using division. So instead of multiplying something into parentheses, we're going to divide something out. So we need to know how to find a GCF because that's going to be important and the first step in doing any of this. So let's look at example 1, and it says use the distributive property to factor 10y squared plus 15y. Remember, we talked about that word factor. We said factoring means you're trying to figure out what you can multiply together. And we talked about finding like a factor of 8, and we said 1 times 8 or 2 times 4. Those were all factors of 8. So we are trying to figure out what can you multiply together to get 10y squared plus 15y. So the very first thing we're going to do is what we did with yesterday's lesson. We're going to take our 10y squared and we're going to break it down. And you can probably do this one without having to show a lot of work. It's pretty easy. So 10 would break down into 2 times 5, and then y squared would break down into y times y. Then we have 15y, and we're going to break that down as well. So 15 breaks down into 3 times 5, and then we just have a single y. So remember, we're going to look for factors that they have in common. So right here I see that they have 5 in common, and I see that they have y in common. So what I'm able to do right here is figure out the GCF, and it's going to be 5 times y, which is just 5y. That's what we did in yesterday's lesson. But we're now going to use this answer, this 5y, because we are dividing it out. In other words, 10y squared divided by 5y. Well, if we've already taken out the 5 and the y, what's left? We have a 2 and a y left. So 10y squared divided by 5y is 2y. Then I'm going to include my plus sign, and then I'm going to go to the next term. So 15y, I want to divide it by 5y. I've already taken out the 5 and the 3. That leaves me, the 5 and the y, and that leaves me with a 3. Now this is our answer. We use the distributive property to factor out a greatest common factor. We took out what they had in common.